both sexes, I think a little bit are kind of pointing the finger
at each other for the
at each
reason that
other.
that there's this huge battle among the sexes right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but it's oddly enough, I do think one of the solutions could be uh finding finding our way back to religious faith.
Welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis,
I'm Michael.
and we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. So the topics on our show range from theology, masculinity, movies, philosophy, books, pop culture, and many other subjects. We often talk about the people we admire and the wisdom that they share. People such as Jordan Peterson, who we believe is sage of our time. Michael, why are we here?
Today we're talking about a episode. It's not just about the episode of Chris Williamson did an interview on his show, The Modern Wisdom, with a guy named Stephen J. Shaw, who made a documentary called The Birth Gap.
What does a declining birth rate mean in terms of both countrywide and global GDP?
Yeah, it's not good. In fact, there's nothing good about it. I mean, the reality, I think people imagine, and it's understandable, that you think we can kind of slowly slide our populations down, slide our economies down, so we all just shrink a little bit, year by year. That it's almost going to be like an airplane kind of slowly coming into land, and we'll have this kind of resettling. It's not like that.
People say there was only 2 billion people on the planet 100 years ago. Why is it a problem that we would go back to that?
So the transition is a problem.
And we just figured we'd kind of get on and talk about this. I mean, I've been gleaning stuff about this for quite a while. Just, I guess, to be honest, I'm not sure why there's, for me, like such an interest. It could be maybe because I have 4 kids and I'm maybe just looking at the society and wondering why other people aren't having kids. Possibly, I don't know. Why do you think you're interested in some of this stuff?
So I work with a couple of guys who are married and don't plan on having children, and it seems to be the society we live in seems to be obsessed with themselves. I think that's really what it comes down to, because I mean, I don't know, and this isn't to be disparaging towards people who choose not to have children, but there's a certain thing that happens, and I noticed it as when women get older, they show a massive amount of regret for not having children, especially when they hit 40. When they hit 40, it's like their biological clock is telling them that this is necessary. And even if they, like, people that I knew like in high school who didn't want to have children are now struggling to have children in their 40s. Mm-hmm. And so there's a massive amount of regret when you're a 20-year-old kid, you're not thinking of the future, right? But when you're a 40-year-old person, you're thinking you're thinking of the future, because you're going.
Yeah, and Jordan Peterson talks about this, but that, like, he asks the question, what are you going to do in your old age? Right? Like, you're going to live to probably 80-ish, mm-hmm, somewhere around there, right? And if you choose not to have kids, I mean, okay, sure. Well, now you're 80 and you go to Christmas with no one.
Well, and we see this in our own lives, because our oldest brother is taking care of our elderly mother, and our how old's mom? Mom's
Oh,
86.
86. Yeah, 86. Yeah.
And she's her brain is gone, and to not have a really good a better way to say it, but and when you get to an old age, you need people to take care of you. Now, most young people are not thinking about that. Most young people are thinking, I'm young, I'm dumb, and I'm full of cum, and I'm gonna go do whatever I want. And the problem with that is that they're I heard somebody say this, and I can't remember who it is, so it's not me who came up with this, but basically the idea that my children will be taking care of the selfish person who decided to not have children kind of pisses me off, because
probably Sargon of Akkad was on Chris Williamson's show. That might have been.
He mentions that. He
talks about that,
and I can't disagree with it, because I'm sitting here thinking. So I have a guy that I work with, and he's a perfectly nice person, but he's told me that he's married and they're not having kids. He likes his things, like he plays a lot of video games, and he buys a lot of guns, and his wife likes the outdoors, and so they kind of do their thing, and it's a very they're doing what they want to do, and I don't disparage people for it, but it's extremely self-centered. And and now my children may not directly take care of him in his old age, but indirectly they would. So their taxes are going to go to the care
GDP.
Of,
Chris Williamson talks about it in this episode that with Stephen Shaw. They mention it's not directly. My children aren't directly going to be taken care of. Probably. I mean, maybe one of my kids will be working in a nursing home. That definitely could be right. But it's not about directly taking care of the old, but it's GDP, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just the economy is altogether kind of just taking care of the old, right? And
this is a real problem that like really smart people have talked about. Elon Musk has talked about it. And nobody's concerned about it. It's very blinders. There's like blinders on about this subject, and
well, I think that comes to the environmentalists. Basically,
Michael, explain a little bit about what it is before we get really into this.
the birth gap. So the birth gap being, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the birth gap.
So the birth gap being that we're going to, and Stephen Shaw talks about it being that we're going to, even if we try to have a lot of kids, we're still going to have kind of this focal point of a lot of old people and a lot of young people, but the competent adults that can run society is going to be kind of strained.
Slim. Well, it's slimming down to the point where he's afraid that, and this is Stephen J. Shaw, who was a guest on Chris Williamson's Modern Wisdom podcast. There's going to be a strain on the people who are able-bodied, who are working and are putting money into the general population enough to take care of the old and also have children.
Hourglass shape to the demographic, where you're going to have a bottleneck of competent adults, you're going to have a ton of young people and a ton of old people, and you're going to squeeze very, very hard on that group of adults in the middle
to further the generation. And the problem right now is that according to the numbers, we are so, like, everybody's not having children. There's a massive amount of people not having children. And so that what's happening is it's funneling down. And he said his explanation was it was an hourglass shape. So you'll have all these people in the middle where the hourglass is smallest, that are the able-bodied adults. And there's
Yeah.
going to be so few of them that there's not going to be enough to take care of the old people, and there's not going to be enough to have children to make more people.
Yeah.
And what he's claiming that we could probably course correct at some point, but right as it stands now, it looks very much like there's going to be a huge strain on the adult population. I don't think he gave a timeline in the episode, but it's like 15 years or 20 years.
Yeah,
20 to 40 years or something like that.
And he talks about many of the countries are and have been falling underneath replacement. So not even really like growth, but just replacement population through, I mean, China, the numbers from China are skewed, so we don't really know exactly.
He focuses a lot on Japan. So Japan,
yeah, he focuses because he lives in Japan. That's one.
Well,
but
Japan has fallen under, so they are no longer replacing they're no longer population replacement. So they've fallen under population replacement, which means there's going to be a lot of old people and not enough young people to take care of the old people.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking about.
And the way I think it was Elon Musk that said that countries are getting to the point where their adult diapers are selling out more than kid diapers.
You've got cases like Japan where adult diapers outsell baby diapers.
And that's a good way to kind of look at it.
Because
it's
because that's scary. That's scary. And you and I are just here to kind of discuss why this may be. And like I said,
and this stat blew my mind that Shaw talks about, was that there's basically, out of women who do not have children, there's basically 10% that cannot have children. And that's a sad case. Mm-hmm. And my heart goes out to those women who just, they get married, they want to have children, and just for whatever medical reasons cannot have children. So that, and I never want to talk disparagingly towards those that, and my wife will mention this sometimes, like, well, there's a lot of women who just can't have children.
Yeah.
And that's true. Yeah. So love goes out to those. And then about 10% who choose not to have children. They're just like, I never want to have children. And that's okay. Like, I mean, I don't agree with those people.
You're free to make your choices, right? We're not saying anything against that. Well, we are saying something against. Go ahead and finish your point.
Yeah. Well, but 80% of women who do not have children always plan to have children, but they literally kind of time out of their time to be able to have children.
Life gets away from them, essentially.
And it just never happens. I actually think, and we always look at the women at this kind of stuff because we need women to have children. That's how it works.
That's how it works.
Welcome, boys and girls, to biology
101.
But I actually think this is a falling apart of men as well. Like, because he interviews a lot of women who are just like, yeah, I always wanted to have children, but my boyfriend at the time, blah, 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 we broke up, we never got married, had a divorce.
Yeah.
Right. All these things. Right. And
it's
hard
both
to,
sexes. It's both of the sexes' fault, right?
It's an intersectional dynamic. It's both sexes having a part to play in this. But I do feel like if men if men were better men, we would actually open up the door to be able to, because women, it's like women need things to be right. Like they need things to be right in order for them to want to bring a child into. It's like nesting, right? It's like
nesting.
animals will fix a place, they'll fix a home, they'll make something so that they can have their,
it'll be perfect for when the baby comes, kind of. That's the idea behind it,
right. So I mean,
so women aren't going to have children if the environment around them isn't in some way, in their mind, capable for them to have children. So there's a lot of like teenage pregnancies that happens, right?
Yeah.
And society will tell women, don't have children until you're absolutely ready. Well,
yeah.
The truth is that you're never ready. You just become ready. When it happens, you become ready. So my first kid was not a planned pregnancy, and me and my wife looked at each other and we're just like, okay, we're going to rise to the occasion. That's what happens when it comes to children, when it comes to pregnancies that are unforeseen pregnancies.
Yep.
And we could blame this birth gap on a lot of things. One of those things is abortion, because that's more readily prevalent in our society and most Western societies altogether. And they never touch on this in the episode. But because of that, because people can choose when to have their children, they may never have their children, because you talk to a lot of people that are like, oh, I'll never be ready to have kids.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing about human nature, is that when circumstances are thrown on you and you have to make efforts to rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
So your car breaks down, you get out, you do what you can, or you get a flat tire, you change out the flat tire. You don't want it to happen. You may not be ready for it to happen, but you're going to rise to the occasion to fix the situation. And that's the same thing that happens with children, right? When you're pregnant, nobody's really ready, and everybody feels like they're not ready, because it's such this emotional toll. It's emotional, it's physical, it takes all of this out of you, but you become ready, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting. I thought that stat was so interesting. 80% of women that always planned that they would have children, but then just don't, right? Life turns out, and a huge part of it is just going to be ready availability to birth control, right? You mentioned like there's access to abortions, but I would think that would, in all, comparatively compared to birth or pregnancies that are avoided by the pill, by just general contraceptives, that would be pale in comparison. Well, but we've never had a time that contraceptives have been readily available for throughout
3
this,
decades,
right?
For 3,
So throughout this, so I mean, that's one thing that
so people are making the conscious choice not to have children anymore.
And most of them are wanting to down the road, but then just down the road never happens, right?
Because it goes back to my point. Nobody's ever ready. You're never ready to have a child. You never think that you are. You're always like, I'll get this job, I'll get this mate, I'll get this house, and then everything will be perfect. But that's not how life works. Life never becomes perfect. We're always waiting for it to become perfect, and it never is. It is always going. It's always going to be this thing that's out of reach for us.
And there's also a theory. Chris Williamson mentions it. There's a theory, and maybe he mentions a stat. I can't remember that people we're more built to pair bond with each other if a man and a woman pair bond with each other if they do have a child. And some of these people are maybe they get married, maybe they just move in together or whatever, they have this long-term relationship, but if they never have a child, it's actually kind of, it goes against the nature of us to stay together if we have children together, right? So the divorce just kind of comes along with the fact that you've been together for 7 years. I can't stand you anymore. I'm out.
Yeah.
Right.
And what children does is it gives you this common goal. We are going to raise this thing together and it will keep you together. And then after over a period of time, maybe you just stay together because that's the more convenient, because we're social animals. We're meant to be together, but we also have these moments where we just hate being around each other and we don't want to be around each other. And if you take that to the most extreme conclusion, and that is divorce, right? You're getting out.
Yeah.
But with children, it's something outside of yourself that makes you stick around, right?
I mean, I'd wonder if there's a stat that says divorces between people who do not have children is more likely than divorces that happen between people who have children. I don't know. That would be an interesting stat to find out. But because I'm sure that obviously a lot of divorces happen whether you have children or not.
Yeah.
But so, Chris's point was that if you are in a relationship and you prolong long enough having children with that person, then the likelihood that you're going to just be done with that person and go away, step out, break up is more likely. And I tend to agree with them. I'm pretty well. I mean, it's hard for both of us to talk to this. One thing we can talk to is that we did get married, we did have children, right? And I guess in a sense, we probably did that more out of like a religious upbringing than.
Well, and that probably has a lot to do with it too, because the longer that society goes in a secular way, the more likely we are to have less children as well, right?
It's true. Yeah.
Because one of the religious tenets is to raise a righteous posterity, right? To
kind of.
And if you want to take religion out of it, it's more like we're here to raise good people, right? To get them up to a certain level. I always say a contributing member of society. I always tell my kids, I'm raising you to become a contributing member of society. And that's really ultimately what we're all trying to do. And to get back to the people that I know that aren't having children,
here's a stat.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Religious marriages are more successful. So that's one.
Yeah, one.
This article that I was looking at, it doesn't give an actual stat.
Yeah.
Women with religious upbringing do have a slightly lower likelihood of divorce. So that's one. Women who are religious are more likely to have children, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, but if you think about it, I mean, we're talking about a perfect storm here. There's a lot of things going on that is bringing this women not having children,
the birth
gap is just getting greater and greater and greater. And I think we just talked about a little bit about like maybe a huge part of it is that men aren't stepping up to the plate and becoming the masculine role, right? Where, biologically, that's just how we're wired. For a woman to want to have a child with a man, she's going to want to know that he can fend off the saber-toothed tiger and bring in the food for her while she's big and pregnant, because like
she's limited where
there's not a whole ton when you get big and pregnant. Like you and I both know, because we're married and we've had kids, how tough that can be for a woman to be big and pregnant. Like you ain't running from a saber-tooth tiger when that's happening.
You just
right?
Not. Yeah.
You're like, and obviously ancient women were, if they were to run from a saber-tooth tiger, they were probably much better at it than the women of nowadays. But let's be honest, we would not run from a saber-tooth tiger as well as an ancient man would. So
you just kick your pregnant wife and let her get eaten.
It's not, I don't have to outrun the saber-tooth tiger. I just have to outrun you. No. So but if men are not embracing the role of provider, protector, and preside, right? That's kind of a throw out.
Well, these are
Ryan
ancient
Mickler with Order of Man, but
these are ancient tropes. These are, and the reason that they were good at the time, and we're not suggesting we go back to a time where women didn't have rights or anything like that. We believe in women's rights. We believe that that's necessary, but we also we're looking at the birth gap, and we're going, well, what's causing this? Because it's not, people aren't being forced to not like the one child policy in China anymore. They're not being forced to do this anymore. They're choosing to do this. This is what's happening. And it's and that's what I'm saying is, so I know two couples that are married and don't have children. Now, one couple can't have children, but they're also choosing not to adopt and that sort of thing. So they're very involved in their own lives and that kind of stuff. So maybe that's just not an option for them. But they, from what I know of their lives, and these are personal things, but from what I know is they can't have children. And then I know another couple who they can have children. They are just choosing not to. They're together. I guess, I don't know how long they lived together or whatever beforehand, but they are married. I know they're married. The point is that they're choosing not to. And that is becoming more and more and more common. And that is what I think is resulting in this birth gap. Because
the stats the stats that Shaw goes over aren't holding that up. That's only basically a 10% of the women who don't have children. That's only making up about 10%.
It's 20%. It's women who are choosing not to, and then women who are unable to. But there's a whole 80% of women who
always wanted to have kids, but just never
did.
So, and this is what,
but that's still a choice, right? They're still making that choice early on, right?
They wanted to create a situation that was perfect, and you kind of talked to that, but they wanted to create a situation that worked, that was perfect for them to bring a child into the world. That's what they wanted. And I think this goes back to, I think it's a perfect storm thing. It's men not manning up to that role, because
their responsibility.
I think a lot of these women would.
Men are shirking their responsibility when it comes to this.
Yeah. So that's, and that we can talk to that, because I actually feel like we're better equipped to talk to men. But it's also, I'm sure there's a bunch of, obviously the the contraceptives, and Chris Williamson does a whole piece of, or he has a gal on that talks about the pill and the hormones and coming off of that, and it just by a lot, like just on a hormonal level, how it just messes with things. And we're finding that that's in the water, like that can get into the water. So literally it's a lot of things, but it's also just in the water, literally. So there's a lot of things that are going on. The exodus out of churches, right? Out of the faith. I think that probably has a huge play. But religious women are more likely to have children, right? Well, if you have a mass exodus out of,
everybody's leaving religion, and so right? Because they're leaving religion, they're also not and religious people. So I don't want to disparage people who can't or aren't having children. This has become kind of third rail that people don't want to get into, but a lot of people feel less than, especially if they are religious people, they feel less than when they can't have children or they haven't had children. And that's not a good thing. And it's also not a good thing to choose not to have children. It's, so the pressure of society for like women who are in religion and they get pressure from their religious people, that the only reason that pressure, I think that pressure might be necessary, because what they're doing is they're just saying, so everybody's individualistic about this, but nobody's thinking of the big picture of, we have a birth gap in this country, and your children, our children, are going to be so taxed for their time and effort, because they're going to be helping to take care of everybody else's older people, because those people chose not to have children. So there's a huge number of people in our generation who are not having children, and will never have children. And this is what they talk about. But and when it comes to having children, it's a very person's, it's very individualized. Nobody's thinking about the greater good when it comes to that, right? So you're only thinking about and rightly so, it's really hard to raise a child. It's very difficult.
And we're not advocating any kind of, what's the Handmaid's Tale? Kind of like
that's bullshit.
Forcing, in servituding women or anything like that.
Yeah, that's not. But people still need
talk about some ideas of how to kind of with the market, with free will, how to help this, right?
Give incentives for people to try having more children. I would say that maybe the hole in everybody's heart, the God-shaped hole in everybody's heart, is one of the reasons, right? So if more people were more religious, they might actually go, well, okay, so the problem with people leaving religion is that, and Jordan Peterson has been talking a ton about this. There's a few things, and this is coming from a guy who doesn't go to church anymore. So there's three problems there. A religion or a religious organization gives you community. You're going to hang out with people. You're going to get to know people. It gives you a belief outside of yourself, and it stabilizes your environment. So you can't have, so that's why, and that's a good thing to bring children into. It's a good thing to bring children into. And and our society has been so forced. So in the 1950s, the society was just forcing people to do this. And then there was a rebellion and basically all the
The
people
60s.
the 60s,
Yeah.
and then basically all the people from the 60s raised the people who are adults now, and so they're choosing
Yeah.
not to have children altogether. So
Yeah.
it's like you said, it's a perfect storm of a bunch of issues. But maybe if people got back to their religious roots, maybe they would have a more incentive to have children.
I think with religion, with all of its faults, and just religion in general with all of its faults, I think there is an argument to be made that there are societal and there are societal benefits that can be gleaned from participating religiously, I guess, pun intended, in a religious organization. Now, because
one of them,
if you think about it, you and I, like, it's not that I met my wife at church,
but it was within
but
the
we became an item because, I mean, literally, if you think about it, we became an item because of our religious faith.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I assume that we could say the same for you.
Well, yeah, and
this is anecdotal, but if you think about it,
one of the things that I'd like to point out to people, and especially people who are struggling in the dating department, is, do you want the type of person that you would meet at a bar, or do you want the type of person you're going to meet at a church?
It's a good point. Very valid.
So
yeah.
Where are you spending most of your time? At a bar? Okay, fine. If you're spending most of your time at a bar, you're going to meet that person and you're going to marry that person. And most likely there's going to be some problem in the future. I can't, it's a generalization. It's very,
we don't want to generalize too much, because I mean, there's good people, like
there's bad
good
people
that goes to bars.
Yeah, there are good
and there's bad
people
that go to churches.
Yes.
So let's be honest.
So yes, and that's very, very true. But I've always said that because it's there's a type of person, if you're in your 50s and you go to a bar on a weekend, every weekend, and you're unmarried and you don't have children, there's something wrong with that person in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I wouldn't say, I wouldn't attack the person. I would just say on a societal level, if we have people that are this way,
yeah,
is that helping us societally become better? And I mean, I would argue no. I don't think that does societally help us become better.
So
but I also, I mean, it's the same for the, I mean, I consume a little bit of the manosphere stuff but those guys, it's like, you know, screw as many women as you can, blah blah blah. It's like, no, there's something greater to be. There's a star, there's a logos, Jordan Peterson would call. There's a logos, there's something that's greater that we should be kind of aiming towards, right? And I think we should aim towards that together, the sexes together. And maybe that is why it would make more sense to meet a girl or a guy that you fall in love with
at a church,
at a religious
or a community like gathering, or a play, or a, like, anything that doesn't. So when you pour alcohol on problems, it burns, right? So if you're going to a bar just to have a good time, that's fine. Go have a good time. But if you're going to a bar to hook up with somebody, that'll be your life, and you will be hooking up all your life, and you won't find a permanent mate. You won't find somebody that's going to be, and they're very
a generalization,
successful.
yes, but
yes, that's a generalization. But if that's all you're doing, that's not like I remember this girl in college that was complaining to me once about something about finding a good man and stuff like that. And I said, well, where are you meeting these guys? And she's like, well, I'm going to a bar. And I said, have you tried going to a church? She's like, I'm not going to go to church. And I'm like, but that's the kind of guy you're meeting. They're just there to hook up. What do you expect? If you go to it, and now that's not to say that that's a heavy generalization. I don't think she ever actually went, but she did see the point. I was like, do you see the point here? This is why your relationships only last a couple of months. You give it up right away, and then you're not, and then he's not interested in you anymore, right?
Yeah.
And that's the type of person you meet at a bar.
On a societal level, this could be one of the things that could be helping this also is online dating, right? Just sheer option paralysis, right? It's like, how can I pair bond to this one woman when I have so many options to my disposal, right? And I mean, up until the last 30, 40 years, right, you were limited. I mean, and even if we went back even farther than that, like if you were in a village, right, you probably had an option of just a couple of dudes to marry, right? Or and the same vice versa. You probably only had a couple of options.
Yeah. For mates. For
mates. Yeah.
So
so now it's like, you get option paralysis, and it's just like, why would I just stick with this one when I've got
all the fish in the sea,
all these options open to me, and all it is swipe right, and we're there.
And now we're there, and now what's happened is you're looking at a couple of generations of people who have been swiping right, and now say this hypothetical woman is 37. She's been swiping right. She looks great still. She's been swiping right for a long time. And all of a sudden that biological clock ticks in, and she goes, ding, I want a relationship that's long and lasting. I want to have children in the relationship. Am I going to find a man? Not when you're swiping right. Because his options are younger and younger.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to. And so you have to start looking other places if you want that to work. And most of the time it's not going to work, because I think that in itself is probably one of the real issues of the birth gap, is because if you're a high quality woman who's only got from 18 to, I think it's 18 to like 45, that's your prime years for having children, or 18 to 40.
Yeah.
And after that, it's going to be really difficult to have children. And
and in the documentary, did you watch I didn't, at least the first part of the documentary? I didn't pay the $20 to watch the whole thing of his birth gap documentary.
What is that? Share that his organization.
Oh, it's birthgap.org, I believe.
That's Stephen J. Shaw. He made a documentary about this problem. It's on YouTube.
Birthgap.org. So there he has a doctor talk about. Sorry,
the documentary's called what is it called? It's called I think it's called The Birth Gap, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called The Birth Gap.
Yeah. Okay. And it's a hour-long documentary on YouTube that you can check out.
Oh, that's not just the first part. That's just the first part.
Yeah.
On YouTube, he put out for free the first part. It's an hour, 50 minutes long. And then he has the other two parts, I guess it's 3 parts, on behind a paywall. on his website.
Okay.
Which I mean, I'm interested enough. I'll probably eventually just go get the whole thing. But y'all, I lost track of where we were going with that. But
well, we may wrap this up pretty quick.
Yeah.
Any
maybe
final
just
thoughts on it?
It's really just our thoughts on this. I think that both sexes, I think a little bit, are kind of pointing the finger
at each other for the
at each
reason
other.
that there's this huge battle among the sexes right now.
Yeah. But it's oddly enough, I do think one of the solutions could be finding our way back to religious faith. And that it's weird. It's kind of weird saying that. But it'd be interesting to kind of talk with some guests maybe, or have some people on to kind of hash this out a little bit. But and then also just like, we don't want to force women to in any case to really force them to have children when they don't want to have children. But it's more of, on a societal level, what can we do to encourage people? I mean, they talked about like maybe college, like it being more of a norm for women to do college in their 30s rather than in their 20s, right? Like there's some things that societally we could do to help to encourage and support, right? Because I mean, and taxes. Like, I think if we gave people who have children better tax breaks and things like that, I think that would be that would move the needle a ton.
Well,
right? So there's a lot.
And
of
here's
things.
another thing: is pop culture. Pop culture makes rearing children out to be the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And I hate it. I really hate it, because it's probably the best thing ever. It's you don't do a lot of the things you wish you would want to do. You don't travel as much. You don't, there's 100 different things that you don't do. But at the end of the day, when you're laying on your deathbed, are you going to go, oh, I traveled to so many places, I'm so proud that I did? Or are you going to go, I wish I had children? I wish, or are you going to go, the biggest pride that I have in my life is raising these children? That for at least for me, it's going to be about the children. And this is something very hard to explain to people who don't have children, because they love their lives, right? They're doing everything they want to do. They're having as much sex as they want. They're traveling a bunch. They're buying things that they want. It's like, yeah, you're going to give that up most likely, but what are you going to think about when you're on your deathbed?
Or just when you're in your 70s and
alone,
like, you've got no one.
Your wife of 50 years dies and you're going to be sitting alone. You're not going to have anybody taking care of you. You're not going to have people visiting you. It's going to be a horrible life. That's all that's what gives me the struggles that I go through to just provide for my family. What I got to always tell myself, it's going to be worth it at some point when my kids are visiting me and I'm in an old folks home and they're so happy to see me, and I got grandchildren who are happy to see me. That's going to make it worth it. Right.
Yeah.
And hopefully you haven't burnt all the bridges in your life to hopefully your relationships with your children are good enough that they will want that. I don't know. I mean, that's that's got to be a better motivation than I traveled to this place and I took a bunch of pictures,
Right. Yeah. So cool. Well, let's wrap that up. And well, it'd be fun to get some people on and chat about this
a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will you give the socials?
Oh yeah. So we're on Twitter at the Brothers V Random, and YouTube is at the Brothers Random, Instagram at the Brothers Random, and our Facebook is just the Brothers Random page. So
also we are on Spotify, we are on Apple podcasts. Please, I guess this is our beg time. We're gonna beg you to share, subscribe, and put things out there. We're hoping to get a few guests to kind of discuss things with us, the topics that we enjoy, and hopefully that'll be coming in the future, not too distant future. And in the meantime, we're going to still do the Jordan Peterson Exodus seminars. We're going to be talking about movies a lot more, back and forth.
Random shit.
So in the meantime, keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. Michael, talk to you later, brother.
Have a good one. See ya.